You're not contributing. We've got mouths to feed." That's what my son-in-law said to me after I cooked their meals, folded their laundry, and grieved the loss of my husband under their roof. Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm 68, and the night they kicked me out with 2 suitcases and no goodbye was the night something inside me woke up. They thought I'd disappear. Instead, I bought the building they live in, and let's just say, rent day feels very different now. Have you ever been treated like a burden by the very people you sacrificed for? Tell me in the comments. When did you realize silence was no longer love? The clink of Jason's fork against his plate was the only sound in the room. Emily sat across from him, scrolling absently through her phone, her thumb moving in tiny, detached swipes. The chicken pot pie I'd baked sat mostly untouched between them. I took a bite of mine, though I couldn't taste it. Sitting there, I felt like I was holding my breath inside someone else's home. This was supposed to feel like refuge. After Harold passed, Emily told me I could stay for a while. "As long as you need, Mom," she had said. I had clung to those words like a lifeline. After all, what else did I have left? The house Harold and I built together in Cedar Park was too full of shadows. I sold it 6 weeks after his funeral. Every drawer, every doorway felt like it might still hold his voice. I told myself Emily's home would be a soft place to land. I didn't expect to feel like an intruder. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind me. Jason's boots scraped the tile as he pushed back from the table. He didn't look at me when he stood. He rarely did. There was a time when I thought he was just quiet, reserved. Now I understood. He simply didn't want me here. I rinsed the dishes after dinner. Emily offered half-heartedly, but I waved her off. "It's nothing," I said, like I always did. The water was too hot, scalding my hands. Maybe I let it be. Maybe part of me needed to feel something. Later that night, I folded a load of laundry in the small guest room, sheets, some towels, one of Jason's hoodies that I found balled up under the couch. I laid everything out neatly on the bed. I thought it might help, thought maybe they'd see I wasn't just taking up space. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to matter. But when Jason passed by in the hallway and glanced at the folded pile, he just said, "Did anyone ask you to touch our stuff?" I didn't answer. I just gathered the laundry basket and walked quietly to the linen closet. The wood floor creaked behind me. His muttered voice, barely audible, drifted through the hallway like a slap. "Freeloader." I stood still for a long time, staring at the doorknob in front of me, my hand frozen mid-reach. My throat burned. I wanted to believe I misheard, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. I wanted to ask Emily about it, wanted to say something over breakfast the next morning, but when I tried, she just waved it off. "Jason's been under a lot of pressure at work. It's not personal, Mom." Not personal, but it was happening to me. The way he changed the channel when I was mid-show, the way he sighed when I entered a room, the way he left me off the group grocery list and told Emily they were tight on space in the fridge. The message was clear. I was welcome here the way an extra chair is welcome in a crowded room. Reluctantly. Still, I told myself it was grief talking, mine and theirs. Losing Harold had stripped the world of its warmth. Maybe we were all just cold in our own ways. But that night, that dinner, something shifted. I remember the pot pie bubbling in the oven, the smell of thyme and butter filling the kitchen. I had tried to make it just the way Jason liked it. I even found the brand of crust he once mentioned offhand. I told myself that if he could taste something familiar, something comforting, maybe he'd look at me like a person again. He didn't. We sat in silence as we ate. Emily barely looked up from her phone. Jason sipped his beer slowly, deliberately. The tick of the wall clock grew louder with each passing second. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't say why. I just had that feeling, that strange, invisible pressure, like the air was waiting for something awful to happen. Then Jason set his fork down. The metal clattered against his plate. "You know," he said, his voice calm but heavy. Maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. Emily looked up. Her hand froze mid-swipe. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, steady. Jason leaned back in his chair. "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." Extra mouths. The words hit harder than I expected. I stared at him, unable to blink. My mind raced for something to say, anything, but the hurt rose too fast. I turned to Emily. She looked at her lap. Then, without meeting my eyes, she mumbled, "Maybe it's best if you, I don't know, look for something more stable. For everyone's sake." Everyone's sake. I stood up. My chair didn't scrape. It slid quietly like it didn't want to make a scene. I nodded just once. My fingers curled into my palms. I didn't trust my voice, so I said nothing. I walked to the guest room, closed the door softly behind me, and then I began to pack. 2 suitcases. That was all I had left of my life. I folded my clothes with shaking hands, tucked a photo of Harold into the side pocket. I didn't cry. Not yet. My body was too stunned to produce tears. It was like I was watching someone else in the mirror, some older woman moving in slow motion, gathering up the fragments of her worth. Outside, the wind picked up. The branches scraped gently against the bedroom window. I zipped the second suitcase and sat down on the edge of the bed. My breath fogged in the cold air. The heating vent in the corner clicked, but didn't turn on. That house was never meant for me. I see that now. I looked around the room one last time. The walls were bare. The bed was neatly made. I placed a folded note on the nightstand for Emily. Just 4 words. "Thank you. I understand." Then I lifted the suitcases, one in each hand, and stepped into the hallway. No one came to see me off. The front door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on the porch, the night pressing in around me. The sky above was clear, moonless. I pulled my coat tighter, listening to the distant traffic hum, the rustle of dry leaves on concrete, and I thought, is this how family love ends? Not in yelling, not in fire, just quietly. The vending machine clunked, but nothing dropped. I stared at it for a long second, waiting. Then I pressed the button again. Still nothing. My last $1, gone. I didn't even bother shaking the machine. I just let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. The motel hallway reeked of old fries and mildew. Fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing like a dying fly. I shuffled back to room 6, the key card warm in my palm from clutching it too tight. When I opened the door, the same stale air greeted me. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. The bedspread was thin, scratchy. Still, it was shelter. It was more than I had 2 nights ago. I dropped my coat on the chair and sat down on the edge of the bed, facing the small window. A neon sign from the diner across the street blinked open in half-broken letters. It bathed the room in red and pink hues, like I was trapped inside a broken Valentine. My suitcase sat half unzipped on the floor, one wheel broken, the zipper rusted. I reached for it, digging beneath the clothes I hadn't had the energy to fold. At the bottom was a shoebox, the one I always moved but never opened. It held little things, old photos, birthday cards, a lock of Emily's hair from her first haircut, and near the very bottom, wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was a leather-bound book. I froze when I saw it. My mother's diary. The cover was cracked, the edges soft from time. I didn't even remember packing it. Maybe it was buried in the hallway closet, maybe I grabbed it by accident. But now that it was in my hands, I couldn't put it down. I sat cross-legged on the bed, the springs groaning beneath me, and ran my thumb across her name, written faintly inside the front cover. Ethel Louise Parker. Her handwriting. All loops and ink, the kind she used on lunch notes back when she packed me sandwiches with the crusts cut off. The first pages were simple. Weather updates, grocery lists, grumbles about the price of eggs. But as I flipped further, the tone changed. Her writing grew tighter. Secretive. Desperate, June 11th. He came again today. He stood in the garden just past the fence, said he wished things were different, that he could claim us. But he has a family, a business, a name to protect. I asked him to leave. He said he'd make arrangements. My chest tightened. I turned the page. June 18th. He brought money this time. Said it wasn't hush money, it was for Margaret's future. I refused it. He left it anyway. Said his lawyer would know what to do. Goldstein, or was it Levinson? Goldstein. That name echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. I kept reading, flipping faster now. August 4th. I told him I didn't want Margaret to grow up with a ghost for a father. He said, "She has you." That's more than I ever gave my other kids. My fingers trembled. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. I leaned back against the headboard, trying to make sense of what I'd just read. My mother had an affair. No, more than that. She had me from it. I blinked hard, looking around the dim room as if someone might materialize from the shadows and confirm it all. The heater kicked on with a hollow groan. I pulled my knees to my chest, the diary still open on my lap. Who was he? The name she used wasn't full, just initials, RK. I whispered the letters aloud. They sounded strange coming out of my mouth, like a code I was never meant to crack. The entries grew fewer as the months passed, but one stuck with me. November 23rd. If anything ever happens to him, he said I should reach out to Leonard Goldstein in Dallas. He'll know what to do. He said there's a trust, hidden, untraceable, not legal, but real, for Margaret. I asked why he never gave her his name. He said, because names come with chains. I closed the book. The room tilted slightly, or maybe it was just my head. I set the diary beside me and stood, walking to the window. The street below was quiet. A stray dog wandered past the dumpster. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. I leaned my forehead against the glass. Could this be true? Could I have spent my entire life never knowing who I really was? I turned around, scanned the room like I might find answers tucked in the folds of the curtains. My mother had been gone for 20 years. She never breathed a word of this to me, not once. And yet here it was, hidden in a box I nearly left behind. I sat back down on the bed. My fingers found the page again, the one that started it all. She must never know. But I did know now, and I couldn't unknow it. A thought struck me. Goldstein. The name still echoed. Where had I heard it recently? Then it clicked. Back in Cedar Park, when Harold was finalizing our will, there'd been a conversation with a mutual estate attorney just in passing. A mention of someone named Leonard Goldstein, semi-retired, still working out of a private firm in Dallas. I hadn't thought twice about it then. Now, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I reached for my phone, but it was nearly dead. No signal either. I didn't have Wi-Fi here. I'd have to wait until morning to search. Still, I clutched the diary like it might dissolve if I let go. So much of my life had been shaped by what I didn't know. By silence. By sacrifices made behind closed doors. And now, for the first time in weeks, maybe years, I wasn't just thinking about survival. I was thinking about origin. I reread the November entry again. Each word felt heavier than the last. My hands trembled. My heart thudded in my chest. What if everything I believed about my life was half a lie? The receptionist barely looked up when I walked in. Just a nod toward the chairs near the wall and a murmured, "Mr. Levinson will be right with you." I sat down on a stiff leather cushion that groaned beneath me. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish, the kind of scent that made you sit a little straighter without knowing why. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a deep, deliberate sound like it had nowhere else to be. I held my purse in my lap, fingers curled tight around the strap. Inside it, folded neatly, was a letter I had written by hand 2 weeks earlier. It had taken me hours to finish. I'd rewritten it 3 times, trying to strike the right tone, polite but pleading, careful but honest. I didn't know if it would even be read, and yet here I was. The door creaked open, and a man in a dark blue sweater stepped into the room. He looked to be in his late 70s, white hair combed back, eyes sharp but kind. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked. I stood. "Yes, Joanne." He gave a slight nod. "I'm Leonard Levinson. Thank you for coming." He led me down a narrow hallway lined with dusty bookshelves and framed newspaper articles. The floor creaked beneath our steps. When we reached his office, he motioned for me to sit in a high-backed chair across from a heavy oak desk. "I received your letter," he said as he settled in, "and I knew it might come. One day." My breath caught. "So it's true?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, setting it gently on the desk between us. Then he looked at me and said the words that would change everything. "I always wondered when you'd come." He slid the folder toward me. My hand hovered over it for a moment before I opened it. Inside was a letter, yellowed slightly with age, handwritten. The envelope read, "To my daughter, Joanne Louise." My fingers trembled as I pulled it free. I unfolded the paper slowly. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. Each line cut deeper than the last. "Joanne, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the truth I was too much a coward to share in life. Your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew. She raised you with grace and strength and silence. A silence I asked of her, selfishly. I am your father. Not by honor, perhaps, but by blood. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I hope to leave you something more meaningful than regret." The words blurred for a moment, and I had to blink several times before continuing. "Over the years, I've arranged for a portion of my personal assets to be held separately, privately, not traceable through my formal estate. It isn't much, not compared to what I should have given, but it's something that's yours. My attorney, Mr. Levinson, will know how to deliver it. He's kept this sealed until now. You are my daughter, and though I failed you in life, I acknowledge you in death. R.K." I sat in silence. The letter rested on my lap like it weighed more than it should. My throat felt tight. The words blood and forgive echoed through my mind, overlapping, clashing. I had spent my whole life believing I was one thing, someone's afterthought, a widow, a burden. And now I was also something else. The hidden child of a man whose name carried more weight than I ever could. "R.K.," I whispered. "Robert Kingsley," Levinson said softly. "Founder of Kingsley Energy. He was complicated, powerful, careful." I nodded slowly. The name wasn't unfamiliar. I'd seen it on gas stations, sponsorship banners, charity buildings. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I met your mother when she was very young," he said. "She trusted me. When he asked me to manage the trust, I agreed, but only on one condition, that if you ever came looking, I'd tell you the truth." He pushed another folder across the table. This one was thicker. Inside were documents, bank accounts, asset summaries, and a spreadsheet that made my stomach lurch. There were numbers I'd never imagined, investments that had matured quietly over decades. And then, tucked in the back, a printed property list. I scanned it absent-mindedly. Houston, Fort Worth, Plano, and then I saw it. East Austin, property ID number 7280, multi-unit residence. My heart stopped. "Wait," I said, pointing. "This address, that's—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Levinson raised his brow. "You recognize it?" I nodded slowly. "That's where my daughter and son-in-law live." He leaned back. "It was purchased under a holding company in Kingsley's name, transferred to your trust 2 years ago. Quiet transaction, clean title." I stared at the page, every muscle in my body tense. He had given me the building, the very one where Jason and Emily lived, the place they told me I didn't belong, that I was an extra mouth to feed. Now I owned it. I closed the folder slowly and exhaled, my pulse pounding in my ears. For weeks, I had drifted through days like a woman erased, and now, suddenly, I had power. Not just over bricks and rent payments, but over the story, over how this chapter ended. I looked at Levinson and smiled, just a little. "Let's see," I said quietly, "how he likes paying rent to the mouth he couldn't feed." They didn't recognize me when I walked in. That was the first victory. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Small, quiet steps that led to this precise hour. The soft hum of the AC, the scrape of plastic chairs being pulled across tile, the low murmur of tenants making small talk, all of it folded into a strange kind of stillness. And there I was, in the back of the room, calm, invisible by design. The community room wasn't large. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were lined with faded posters about recycling and emergency exits. A folding table up front held a stack of printed notices and a pitcher of lukewarm water. Nothing special, just the same bland utility room where they'd hosted birthday parties, tenant potlucks, even the baby shower for Emily and Jason's first. But today, the air had weight. A new rent adjustment notice had gone out last week, and Jason, predictably, had lost his mind over it. I heard his voice before I saw him. "This is ridiculous," he barked from the hallway. "Someone's playing games, and I want answers." He stormed in, his presence louder than the words. Emily trailed behind him, shoulders drawn tight, her gaze flicking to the floor. Jason's baseball cap was tilted backward, his sleeves shoved up like he'd come ready for a fight. He didn't look at me. Why would he? He wasn't looking for someone like me. He marched straight to the front, arms crossed. "All right," he said to the building manager, a young man named Darren who'd been hired 2 months ago. "Where's the owner? I've got questions and I want real answers this time." Darren looked calm, if slightly nervous. "The owner is here today," he said, stacking his papers. "She'll speak shortly." Jason scoffed. "She?" His eyes scanned the room, and then I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping backward drew attention, not loud, but sharp, deliberate. Heads turned. A few tenants raised eyebrows. I stepped forward slowly, every stride measured. I was dressed in black slacks, a slate gray blouse, hair pulled into a low twist. No makeup, no jewelry, just clean lines, firm posture, and the kind of silence that speaks for itself. Jason stared at me. For a second, he didn't say anything. His brow furrowed, confusion twitching in the corners of his mouth, then recognition. "You?" he spat. "You're the owner?" I nodded once. "Good evening." He blinked. The room went still. "You set this up," he demanded. "You've been behind all this? The rent hikes? The new inspections?" "No," I said, voice even. "I didn't set anything up. I just gave you a mirror." He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked over at Emily, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Not really. I turned back to the room. "For those who don't know me, my name is Joanne Louise Miller," I said. "And yes, I'm the legal owner of this building. I've recently assumed full management through my company. All notices, adjustments, and improvements have been authorized under my direction." A murmur moved through the room. Tenants whispering, glancing at one another. Jason, red-faced, took a step forward. "You did this to get back at us." I met his gaze. "Number, I did this to build something that couldn't be taken from me. Not again." He sneered. "You're pathetic. You think owning a building makes you better than us?" I let the silence hang a second longer before answering. "I think it makes me free." Emily's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted between us. I turned back to the crowd. "We'll be making continued improvements, safer locks, updated lighting, pest control, and improved maintenance response times. If you have any questions, I'll be here after the meeting." Darren nodded beside me, then picked up the slide remote to begin his update on the new waste disposal system. But the room had shifted. The focus wasn't on recycling anymore, it was on me, or more precisely, on what I represented. Proof that people like me, people they dismissed, could still rise. The meeting droned on for 15 more minutes. Jason sat down eventually, stiff and fuming. Emily didn't sit at all. She stood near the exit, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her breath. When the meeting ended and tenants began to trickle out, a few stopped to thank me. One older woman shook my hand and said, "About time this place got a woman in charge." I smiled and thanked her, but my eyes stayed on Emily, who hadn't moved. As the room emptied, she finally stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. I studied her face. Her eyes were red around the edges, her lips chapped. She looked tired, older somehow. I didn't answer right away. She took a breath. "All this time you were—" "I needed you to see it," I said gently, "not just hear it." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Behind her, Jason paced like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain envelope. "It's a copy of your lease agreement. No tricks, just business." She didn't take it. "Is this what you really wanted?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. "Number? But it's what I needed." A chair tipped behind us as someone exited in a rush. The door swung open, letting in a gust of spring air. For a moment, we both stood still in the draft, like leaves unsure which way to fall. She whispered, "I didn't know how bad it got." I nodded. "Now you do." I left the envelope on the table and walked past her toward the exit. The hallway outside was quiet. My heels tapped softly on the linoleum, echoing just enough to remind me I was still here, still walking forward. Behind me, I heard Emily's voice, low, broken, unsure. "Mom." But I didn't turn around. Some truths have to echo before they land. She called me 3 times that night. I let them all ring. The phone lit up beside my teacup, casting a small blue glow across the living room. I didn't move. The second time it rang, I turned the screen face down. The third time, I powered it off. Not out of anger, not out of pettiness, but because some silences need to stretch long enough to be heard. My apartment was still. No TV, no music, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock above the sink. I sat in the same chair I always did, by the window, legs tucked beneath me, palms warm against a ceramic mug that had long since gone cold. The voicemail tone pinged a few minutes later, followed by another, then another. I didn't listen, not that night. Instead, I let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket I didn't ask for but couldn't shed. I thought of the night Emily got married, how I'd given a toast, voice steady, eyes wet, and leaned in to whisper, "Speak up, baby," when it was her turn. But she hadn't. She'd smiled, nodded, and let Jason do the talking. He always did the talking. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I finally powered the phone back on. 3 missed calls, 2 messages. The third had been cut off before she could leave one. I tapped the first. "Hi, Mom, A pause. "He's been checking my phone. I think he suspects something. I told him I didn't know who raised the rent, but he's not letting it go." Click. The second message was quieter, just her breathing for a moment. "I didn't think it would get this bad." A sniffle. "He's angry all the time. He says it's your fault, that you humiliated him. But the truth is—" She didn't finish. The line cut out again. I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the call button. I wanted to reach through the static and say, "I'm here." I wanted to tell her I'd forgive her if she just asked. But I didn't, because this wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. This was about acknowledgement. You can't rebuild what someone won't admit they've broken. The next night, I drove past the complex. Not to gloat, not even to look, just to feel close in some strange, painful way. The lights in Emily's apartment were on, but dim, a single lamp in the living room. I parked across the street, engine off, and watched as shadows moved behind the curtains. Then, slowly, the figure of a woman, Emily, slipped out onto the courtyard bench. She sat alone. shoulders curled forward, hands wrapped around her elbows like she was holding herself together. I could see her crying, even from across the lot. No loud sobs, just the slow, quiet kind, where your chest barely moves and your eyes don't even blink. I stepped out of the car. My shoes clicked softly on the sidewalk. I didn't try to surprise her. I made sure she saw me before I got too close. She turned. Her eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. She just wiped her cheeks and said, "I figured you might come." I nodded, sitting down on the far end of the bench, leaving a stretch of space between us that still felt too small for what had passed. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "You're here," I replied. She looked down at her hands. "He thinks someone's feeding me information. He's been watching everything. He changed the Wi-Fi password. He took the key fob off my ring. He's keeping score." "And blaming me for the tab," I said softly. She let out a broken laugh. "Pretty much." We sat there in silence. The air smelled like damp mulch and car exhaust. Somewhere nearby, a faucet dripped. The water hit the concrete in slow, steady beats. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, "for not speaking up. That night. Every night." I looked at her. She didn't look like the same girl who once asked me to braid her hair before piano recitals. She looked worn thin, pulled too tightly by someone else's expectations. "You didn't deserve what we did," she whispered, "but I don't know how to fix it." I took a slow breath, let the words rise gently from my chest. "Some things aren't fixed," I said. "They're rebuilt." She nodded, eyes shining, then looked away. We didn't say anything else. Not that night. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from her again. No voicemails, no texts, no late-night bench visits. Part of me thought that might be the end of it, that she'd retreat back into the silence she had grown used to. But then came the knock. It was just past 7 p.m. A spring rain had rolled in, soft but steady. I had just poured a cup of chamomile when the sound came. 3 gentle taps on the door. When I opened it, Emily stood there soaked through, rain clinging to her lashes, a suitcase in one hand. "I left him," she said, voice trembling. Her lips parted as if to explain, but no words came. Her coat dripped onto the welcome mat. The suitcase wheel creaked behind her as she shifted her weight. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I took the suitcase from her hand and set it gently by the door. No questions, no judgment. Some storms you don't speak over, you just shelter from them, together. He tried to ruin me with truth. I buried him with proof. Jason's final act came in the form of an email. No subject line, no greeting. Just rage poured into jagged sentences. "I know everything, the building, the money, your dirty little history. If you don't undo this, I swear I'll go to the press. I'll drag your name, your mother's, all of it. Let's see how that legacy holds up under scrutiny." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with one line: "Proceed." By the next morning, Jason had a cease and desist in his inbox. Attached were detailed records, every anonymous threat, every falsified document, every maintenance report he'd tampered with. We included the audio clips, those rants in the lobby he thought no one heard, his voice thick with entitlement. He never responded. But Emily told me later he packed a duffel bag and left in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no apology, just a note that read, "You chose her." She did. And in the end, so did I. Not the version of her I clung to from childhood, but the woman she had become. The woman who chose peace over pride, who called the locksmith herself, who stood on my doorstep in the rain and asked for nothing but room to breathe. I stayed in the apartment a little while longer, just long enough to be sure the building would settle under its new management. Then one morning, with the first hints of spring creeping into the trees, I sold it. There was no ceremony, no gavel bang, just a signature and a quiet click of the pen. Half the proceeds went to a local women's shelter, the kind of place I wished I'd known about the night I stood on a curb with 2 suitcases and no one to call. I asked them to name a wing after my mother, the Ethel House. I didn't leave a plaque, just a short note for the wall. You are not invisible. You are not alone. The other half, I used to buy a small house on the edge of Cedar Park. 2 bedrooms, a porch swing, a creaky screen door that sings when the wind shifts just right. It's not fancy, but it's mine, and it's enough. The first night I slept there, I left the window open. The wind rustled the curtains like a lullaby, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of being left behind. Emily visits often now. No performance, no apologies on loop, just presence. Last week, she brought a painting, bold strokes of red and gold across a pale canvas. "It's a phoenix," she said, setting it on the mantel. "I wasn't sure if it was for me or you." "Maybe it's for both of us," I replied. She nodded and didn't press. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't shout. It settles in quietly, one soft moment at a time. We sat on the porch swing that afternoon, tea in hand, toes grazing the wood planks. Birdsong threaded through the stillness. The sun cast long shadows across the yard. Emily leaned against the armrest, eyes half closed, safe. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just my daughter, but the woman she was still becoming. Then I whispered the words I had been holding for too long. "I forgive you." But I wasn't speaking to her. I was speaking to the version of myself that thought silence was strength, the one who swallowed hurt and called it love, the woman who stood quietly in the corner waiting to be chosen, and I forgave her too, because sometimes survival is loud and blazing, but other times it's quiet. A teacup held with steady hands, a porch swing swaying slow, a breath let go, not in anger but in peace. They tried to erase me, but I became someone they could never forget. As the porch swing creaked beneath us and Emily's laughter rose into the spring air, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. I used to believe that staying silent was how love survived, but I've learned this. No one has the right to make you invisible, not even the people you love. Sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stand tall in your truth and let the silence speak for you. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden in your own family, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, because your voice still matters.